The story of this Nazi criminal is unique in many ways. Firstly, this is one of the few cases when even the US administration and President Reagan personally disdained to get involved with such a renegade. Secondly, this criminal was convicted, no matter how incredible it sounds, only thanks to the publication in the Washington Post. And thirdly, he became the first Nazi criminal extradited by the United States to the Soviet Union. Fedor Demyanovich Fedorenko, a native of the Crimean city of Jankoy, after the German attack on the USSR on June 23, 1941, was drafted into the Red Army and sent as a driver to a radio company. His family received a notice that Fedorenko had gone missing in September 1941. In fact, he was taken prisoner near Zhytomyr in early July of the same year and was sent to a temporary prisoner of war camp near the Ukrainian city of Rivne. The conditions in the camp were very poor. The prisoners lived in hastily made dugouts. However, Fedorenko settled down quite well. In camp, he showed himself as a man who could get anything from food and tobacco to clothing. Somehow, Fedorenko even negotiated with the prisoners who were taken out of the camp so that they would bring or barter food and other things to him. There, most likely he expressed a desire to go to the service of the Nazis, because soon Fedorenko was sent to Poland, where the Germans selected Ukrainians to study at the special school Trzevinki. Later, graduates of the school distinguished themselves by special atrocities during punitive operation against civilians and in concentration camps. Fedorenko especially appealed to the German command with his unbelievable cold-bloodedness, incredible cruelty, and the same incredible performance. Thus, the former Red Army soldier was given quite a few opportunities to show himself in business. Fedorenko took an active part in the mass extermination of Jewish people in the Warsaw and Lublin ghettos. For special merits, the Punisher was awarded the position of overseer in the concentration camp in Treblinka. Here he was again noticed. The fact is that even the most notorious executioners, after carrying out the job, often went into a binge to reduce the pangs of conscience. However, Fedorenko, unlike his colleagues, was always calm, restrained, and even sent prisoners to death with a smile. His absolute equanimity delighted even experienced camp authorities. So Fedorenko was soon appointed to the post of commander of a security detachment with the title of Chief Watchman of the SS. It should be noted here that in the camp Fedorenko served in the first department, which was directly involved in the execution of prisoners, so this already gave every reason to accuse him of committing mass murders of prisoners. Fedorenko was given the nickname Black Fedor. The surviving prisoners later recalled that they were afraid of him like fire, afraid of the mere attention of Black Fedor, even his casual glance thrown at them, because no one could know how this could end for a prisoner. The unanimous opinion of all the surviving prisoners of the Treblinka concentration camp was that Fedorenko simply liked to kill. Moreover, he enjoyed the very process of sending people to execution, even children, whom Fedor sent to the gas chamber with a smile. After the war, terrible evidence was obtained of how Black Fedor and his colleagues carried out the executions. Some were shot in the so-called infirmary. 5 people were brought in there, then shots were fired, and the next batch was brought in. Exhausted workers were often subjected to a terrible and painful death by Black Fedor and his subordinates. They were driven into a ditch already filled with bodies, laid on top of the dead, and then, either with a wooden hammer or an axe, they chopped off or split their heads. According to investigators, at least 250 people were executed this way. Also on the conscience of Black Fedor and the rest of the guards of the first department was the so-called suicide wedding. It was the wish of the camp commandant, who wanted to have fun at such an event. A young woman from the laundresses and a groom from the workers were selected. The bride and groom were dressed, the appropriate wedding ritual was performed, and then the newlyweds were sent on their honeymoon. They were shot, and to the cries of "Happy Wedding," their bodies were thrown into the fire. But in addition to incredible cruelty, Fedorenko was also distinguished by pathological greed. After the war, many colleagues of the executioner said that he appropriated the money and valuables seized from the prisoners. At the same time, even in Nazi Germany, this was considered a crime. But for some reason, Fedorenko did not suffer any punishment for this. The most interesting thing is that this was known not only in Treblinka, but even in other concentration camps. As Yakov Savenko, one of the Treblinka guards, testified during interrogation, the fact that Fedorenko takes away jewelry from prisoners and then sells them was known to everyone, even in other camps. After the Red Army and Allied troops began to systematically liberate the occupied territories, Fedorenko somehow managed to escape and later ended up in the American zone. There, during interrogations, he did not say anything about his bloody past, simply stating that he served as almost as ordinary driver. However, he declared that he was afraid to return to the Soviet Union because the NKVD would persecute him. The most interesting thing is that the executioner was believed and even allowed to come to the USA. After some time, Fedorenko received American citizenship and lived a fairly calm and prosperous life. And then the real miracles began. In 1974, a tall, slender old man appeared in his native Jankoy, who came to visit his family. The wife and two already adult sons could not understand why the father had not let them know earlier that he was alive. But Fedorenko said that he was simply afraid to cause problems for the family, since having relatives abroad, especially in the United States, and even more so who were in German captivity in Soviet times, was undesirable and meant constant control by state security agencies. According to the recollections of the sons, their father diligently avoided questions about military service and being in captivity, constantly moving on to stories about life in America. By the way, the state security watched the US citizen closely and even called him in for questioning. However, then Fedorenko was simply released and allowed to return back to America. This incredible fact could be explained by many reasons. First, against the established version, there is no strong evidence that the Soviet KGB carried out mass terror against its citizens. Secondly, at that time, there was still no unambiguously indisputable evidence of the crimes of Black Fedor. Finally, no one had the right to detain a citizen of another state. Therefore, when he returned, Fedorenko decided that everything was forgotten and he could live in peace. However, in 1976, the Soviet Union handed over to the United States copies of the documents about Fedorenko's atrocities. The former executioner was immediately brought to trial, but Black Fedor declared that everything was not true, and in general he was only following orders. Therefore, the judge released him as a victim of Nazism, stating that evidence of Fedorenko's direct participation in the mass executions and torture of prisoners was not provided. But already in 1981, the USSR again sent copies of documents from which it already clearly and irreversibly followed that Fedorenko personally took part in torture and executions. The Second Court was not so loyal, and Black Fedor was taken into custody and deprived of American citizenship. The executioner was not saved by the intercession of the nationalists who immigrated to Canada and who appealed to President Reagan with a request to allow Fedorenko to emigrate to Canada. However, to Reagan's credit, he perfectly knew what the Second War was. Moreover, the president, as a man of honor, simply disdained to get involved with the renegade smeared with blood. Therefore, all appeals of the nationalists remained unanswered. And already in the end of 1984, Fedorenko was transferred to the USSR. However, he was not arrested, but simply settled in Jankoy along with his family. The fact is that KGB simply did not receive an order to take the traitor, and for a while left him alone, of course under supervision. The former executioner began to drink away all the money he had brought with him. When a Washington Post journalist found out about this, he immediately published an article entitled "A Nazi Lives Freely in the USSR." From that moment on, events began to unfold at an incredible speed. Fedorenko was arrested by the KGB. He was charged with personally committing murders and torturing civilians, and soon a trial of Black Fedor took place in Simferopol. By the way, as soon as the family found out who their husband and father really was, they publicly renounced him by publishing it in the Krymskaya Pravda newspaper. We do not forgive the grave guilt of our so-called father, who disgraced the honest name of Fedorenko. We renounce him and do not consider F. Fedorenko our father. Our decision is supported by our mother, Praskovia Vasilyevna. Interestingly, even during the trial, Fedorenko behaved quite arrogantly. For example, he refused a Jewish lawyer, demanding that the lawyer be a representative of a different nationality. In the last word, the former executioner even shed a tear. But everyone understood that he was mourning not his crimes, but himself personally. On the June 19, 1986, due to the totality of crimes committed during the war, Fedor Demyanovich Fedorenko was sentenced to capital punishment, execution. All petitions for clemency and appeals were rejected, and a year later, the sentence was carried out.